Islam is a sinking ship. What happens when we apply historical testing to the standard Islamic narrative, or SIN? Is Islam a sinking ship? Let's revisit the parable. Remember the people trapped on Prison Island and they need to escape to Paradise Island. These two islands are separated by the Sea of Sin. They can choose one of two ships to get there. One is Christianity and another is Islam. In the waters are submarines of scholarship that fire torpedoes of testing at each ship. And if the ship sinks, then the people will die in their sin. These torpedoes have been fired at the ship of Christianity for 200 years, yet this ship is still afloat. We have now fired the same torpedoes at the ship of Islam. Let's examine the damage. Will it too stay afloat, or will it sink? The 5 torpedoes. Any worldview that makes historical claims, that is about events that happened in the past, can be tested with historical tests. Well, Islam is supposed to stand on the 5 pillars. We have tested it with the 5 torpedoes. Torpedo 1, eyewitness testimony. What do Muslim sources from the 7th century say? Why the 7th century? Because the standard Islamic narrative claims that Islam was revealed by AD 632, that is the 7th century. Torpedo 2, historical and archaeological evidence. What does the archaeological evidence from the 7th century say? Torpedo 3, contemporary written sources. What do non-Muslim sources from the same time, that is the 7th century, say? Torpedo 4, textual criticism. We ask, are the Islamic scriptures we have today accurate representations of the original text, or has it changed significantly over time? And Torpedo 5, other relevant evidence, such as geography, science, etc. The tactics. Each torpedo is backed by information and facts. This is the gunpowder or explosives. The more information, the more explosives, and the more powerful the torpedo. We have fired these torpedoes at 3 key aspects of the standard Islamic narrative. Number 1, the Muslim holy city. Was it Mecca? Number 2, the Muslim prophet. That is, did the Prophet Muhammad of the standard Islamic narrative exist in the 7th century? And number 3, the Muslim scriptures, that is the Quran. Was it perfectly preserved by Allah, or was it changed by men? If the outcome is that the sin cannot be supported by evidence, or the sin cannot explain the evidence, then that torpedo scores a direct hit. We then fired the other torpedoes to see if they scored direct hits as well. If we got 15 direct hits, then the ship of Islam will have 15 gaping holes in the side of it and cannot hope to stay afloat. We can then conclude that Islam is indeed a sinking ship, and anyone who wants to escape the prison of their sin will need to look for another ship. The damage report. Mecca is missing. Torpedo 1. There's no eyewitness testimony for Mecca. The sin claims about Mecca are based on sources that are too late by 300 years and too far away by 1800 kilometers. Direct hit number 1. Torpedo 2. There's no archaeological evidence for Mecca from the 7th century. The first coins are from AD 822, the 9th century. Direct hit number 2. Torpedo 3. There are no 7th century sources that mention Mecca. It's first mentioned outside the standard Islamic narrative in AD 741, that's the 8th century. And no maps show Mecca until the 9th century. Direct hit number 3. Torpedo 4. References to the holy city in the Quran and Islamic sources are much more consistent with a place 1,000 kilometers away in North Arabia and Jordan rather than the Mecca of today. Direct hit number 4. Torpedo 5. Mecca is not on any trade route that would have been used in the 7th century. It also has very little water, which makes it a poor site for agriculture and therefore was unlikely to be a significant commercial or cultural centre in the 7th century. Even though people began going there in the 8th century, water had to be brought in from the outside via an aqueduct in the early 9th century. Direct hit number 5. Muhammad is not Muhammad, part 1. Firstly, we need to recognize that 7th century Arabic had no vowels, so it could not write Muhammad. Only the consonants would have been written, so it would appear as MHMD. So instead of Muhammad, we need to look for Muhammad. Torpedo 1. There's no eyewitness testimony for our Prophet Muhammad. The sin claims about him are based on sources that are too late by nearly 300 years and too far away by nearly 1800 kilometers. Direct hit number 6. Torpedo 2. There's no archaeological evidence for a Muslim prophet Muhammad or the next 4 rightly guided caliphs. The first Arab ruler verifiable by archaeology is Muawiyah, but the evidence suggests that he was not a Muslim but a Christian. And the word Mahmud appears in an inscription linking Mahmud with the Lord of the Jews. This is from AD 523, therefore cannot be referring to the Prophet Muhammad who was born in AD 570. Also, the evidence suggests that the word Mahmud appears to be a title meaning chosen one or praised one. And there are coins and inscriptions that mention Mahmud, but this is likely to be a title for the praised one, for example Jesus for the Christians, or the coming Messiah for the Jews. Direct hit number 7. Mahmud is not Muhammad, part 2. Torpedo 3. The 7th century written sources do not support the Prophet Muhammad of the Sin. They also suggest the word Mahmud was a title for Jesus. Direct hit number 8. Torpedo 4. 3 out of the 4 references to Muhammad in the Quran make as much sense, if not more, if we regard Mahmud as a title for Jesus. The 4th could well be a later redaction. Direct hit number 9. Torpedo 5. Linguistic analysis of the word Mahmud shows that it has been around since 1400 BC. It has evolved from being a descriptive title for gold to an honorific title for the chosen one. In the 7th century, it was most likely a title for Jesus for the Christians or the Messiah for the Jews. It only becomes the Prophet Muhammad by the middle of the 8th century. Direct hit number 10. The Quran was made by men and has changed. Part 1. The Sin claims that the Quran was revealed complete to Muhammad from AD 610 to 632, and then compiled complete by Uthman in AD 652. Torpedo 1. There is no eyewitness testimony from Muslim scripture from the 7th century. The claims are based on sources that are too late by nearly 300 years and too far away by 1800 kilometers. Direct hit number 11. Torpedo 2. There is no copy of an original manuscript in Arabic of a complete Quran identical to today's Quran that we can date to the 7th century. The manuscripts that we do have are from the 8th century. They are incomplete and have many variations from today's Quran. Analysis of them shows that there were also many physical changes to the manuscripts, with entire words either added or deleted. So the unchanging Quran was changed. Direct hit number 12. Torpedo 3. 7th century written sources do not mention an Arab scripture or that the Arabs had a separate religion. Muslim sources give contradictory accounts of who compiled the Quran. They also say that there were different Qurans and that many verses were lost, changed, or forgotten. And both Muslim and non-Muslim sources suggest that it was Abdul Malik, not Uthman, that compiled the Quran. Direct hit number 13. The Quran was made by men and has changed. Part 2. Torpedo 4. Textual analysis of the Quran confirms the following. A. It was not written down complete in 652. It first appears around 705 in a defective Arabic script, which allowed for much variation in later copies. This continued so that by the 10th century there were hundreds of them. B. This caused so many problems that 7 were chosen as standard by a man, Ibn Mujahid, in 936. His choices were based on popularity and politics, not theology. In 1194, another 14 were chosen as standard by another man, Al-Shatibi. And in 1429, another 9 were chosen by still another man, Al-Jazari. So the evidence strongly suggests that man chose the Quran, not Allah. C. So we have 30 official Arabic Qurans that are still around today. Analysis has shown that there are more than 90,000 differences between these versions. The Quran used by most Muslims today, the Hafs version, was chosen in 1924 for political reasons, not theological ones. Direct hit number 14. Torpedo 5. Despite Muslim claims, radiocarbon dating is not accurate for dating manuscripts and should not be used. Direct hit number 15. So the eternal, unchanging Quran has undergone many changes over the centuries. Islam is a sinking ship. We have seen when the torpedoes of testing are fired at the ship of Islam, we get the following result. Torpedo 1. There were no 7th century eyewitnesses for the standard Islamic narrative claims about Mecca, Muhammad, or the Quran. 3 direct hits. Torpedo 2. There is no archaeological or historical evidence from the 7th century for the sin claims about Mecca, Muhammad, or the Quran. 3 more direct hits. Torpedo 3. The contemporary written sources from the 7th century Do not support the sin claims about Mecca, Muhammad, or the Quran. 3 more direct hits. Torpedo 4. Textual criticism of the Quran confirms that it was not sent down in 22 years unchanged as per the sin, but evolved and changed over centuries. It also suggests that references to Muhammad are about Jesus and that the Muslim holy city was somewhere in Israel and Jordan, not Mecca. 3 more direct hits. Torpedo 5. Geographical and scientific evidence confirms that the Mecca of today was not the holy city of the Muslim sources. Linguistic evidence shows that Muhammad has been around since 1400 BC and was not the name of an Arab prophet in the 7th century. And radiocarbon dating does not show Quran manuscripts as being 7th century. 3 more direct hits. So we have 15 gaping holes in the ship of Islam. Bottom line, Islam is a sinking ship. So Islam is a sinking ship. What must the Muslim do to avoid dying in their sin? Find another ship. A ship that is not sinking. We have seen what happens when we fire the torpedoes of testing to Islam. What happens when we fire the same 5 torpedoes at the standard Christian narrative? Torpedo 1, Eyewitness Testimony. Accounts of Jesus' life and teachings were all written by people who are eyewitnesses, such as Matthew, John, and Peter, or those who interviewed the eyewitnesses, such as Mark, Luke, and Paul. Torpedo 1, neutralized. Torpedo 2, Archaeological Evidence. Many of the names, dates, people, and events that are named in the Gospels and the Book of Acts have been verified by archaeological findings. Torpedo 2, neutralized. Torpedo 3, Contemporary written sources outside the Bible. A 1st century Roman source, that is Tacitus, a 1st century Jewish source, that is Josephus, and a 1st century Greek source, that is Thallus, confirm that Jesus of Nazareth did exist and was crucified by the Romans. Torpedo 3, neutralized. A ship that is not sinking, part 2. Torpedo 4, textual criticism of the New Testament. We have more than 25,000 New Testament manuscripts in Greek and other languages. Analysis of all of them has allowed scholars to reconstruct the original text with a high degree of accuracy. Yes, variants do exist, and Christians have never denied them, but they do not change any foundational doctrine. Torpedo 4, neutralized. And Torpedo 5, other evidence. There is strong medical evidence that Jesus of Nazareth died by crucifixion. There is also a strong historical case for his resurrection. Torpedo 5, neutralized. So bottom line, all 5 torpedoes have been neutralized. The outcome of this testing. After 200 years of testing, the ship of Christianity is still afloat. Scholars almost universally agree that Jesus of Nazareth, A, was a historical figure and was said to have worked miracles and was crucified by the Romans. B, made disciples who believed that he was God and rose from the dead. And C, the New Testament was written by his disciples, and the text we have today is very, very close to their original writings. So regardless of what someone believes about Christian theology, they cannot deny that Christianity is based on historical events. Unfortunately, the 5 torpedoes have shown that we cannot say the same thing about Islam. So what should a Muslim do now? We've seen that after 200 years of testing, Christianity is still carrying people away from their prison of sin to paradise. For the Muslim, please don't die in your sin. Get on a ship that is not sinking and that will take you to paradise. Dear Muslim, please come to Jesus.